All right, well, my name's Lauren. I'm a customer service representative here at Sound Aircraft Services, and we're here to talk to you about the journey to become a pilot. And we have some really cool speakers here that are at various stages of their flying career. And I will let them introduce themselves. So, first up.
My name is Jim Brundage. I'm the airport director here.
He doesn't need the mic.
Oh,
He doesn't
sorry,
need the
sorry,
mic.
sorry.
No.
I think they are here.
Yeah.
I just failed my first test. My name is Jim Brundage. I'm the airport director here, and I've been here almost 20 years. It was actually a retirement job. I thought I was going to be here maybe 4 or 5 years, but I like it, so I stayed. And it was a job that I took after 35 years of professional aviation, starting out with the Air Force, corporate flying, and United Airlines for 20 years. And at that time, United Airlines, or the government had a requirement that airline pilots had to retire at age 60. So I felt I was too young, so I came here and got this job, and I'm still here. I don't know what else. Anything else?
Corporate?
Yeah, I flew corporate for 6 years. Airline, Air Force for 12 years. Everything from fighter interceptors to air sea rescue helicopters to instructor. I was an instructor pilot in the Air Force for a while. Basic training. Taught new cadets how to fly jets. And let's see, 6 years a corporate pilot and 20 years with United Airlines. And here I am.
He's being modest. I don't know if you ever heard of well, you guys live around here, you know where Brundage is, and it used to be strictly an Air Force base. And what did you fly at Brundage?
I flew both the F-102 fighter interceptor, and then when they switched to an air sea rescue mission, I flew the HH-3 helicopter, air sea rescue helicopter.
So in the Air Force, the F-102, one pilot and one engine's a real airplane. Everything else is kind of... Anyway, my name's Lou Cusumano. I'm from Montauk. I'm sorry, nobody else is here from Montauk. I live out there in Montauk. And my career was similar in some ways to Jim's. I wanted to fly when I was a little kid in Brooklyn. Lived next to Kennedy Airport. Thought it was a cool thing to do. Somehow I got distracted in high school. Wound up going to the Army. And when I got out, I had a GI Bill, and GI Bill would cover flying after you had your own private license, the first license. So I did that for a while and got a private, and then decided I couldn't afford that to go on with a career. So I went back in the military, went to the Air Force, like you did, and learned how to fly their way. And flew for 30 years in the Air Force Reserve. And at the same time, when you're in the Air Force Reserve, you can have a parallel, you pretty much need to have a parallel career if you want to make a living. And that was with the Federal Aviation Administration. Wound up in Washington, D.C., retired, came here my retirement days, and started flying here at East Hampton when the previous school was up and running. Airplanes was a C-141 primarily, the C-130 for a few years, 5 years, I guess. And a lot of little airplanes, a lot of corporate airplanes. And the FAA, we gave check rides to various kinds of pilots, airline pilots, commercial pilots, both. That was about it. And enjoyed the career, and still going.
Maybe we should have started from less impressive.
Yeah.
More impressive.
It's all back to follow, I guess, right? But
So my name is Julie. I live in Sag Harbor. I started flying in 2022, and I did all my flight training in a Cessna 172 out in Colorado, and then moved back with family. And I was flying out of the Islip Airport as an instructor, and then the lead flight standards instructor at ATP. I don't know if you've heard of ATP. It's one of the bigger flight schools. So with the commute, and I like just the idea of flying at a smaller airport, I decided to come here. I'm at 1,200 hours, so close to ATP 1,500 minimums, but I do love instructing, and I plan to stay instructing, stay with general aviation, and I'm excited to learn a lot from Lou.
All right, so as you can see by my hours, I'm the new guy here. But my name is Craig Connor. I'm 24 years old. I'm from East Mauritius, so way out west. A little bit about me. I went to school, went to college. I got a degree in something completely not aviation related, biochemistry actually. And I decided to just work here the summer after, kind of on a whim. And I really fell in love with aviation. I started flying. I got my private this past fall, and I'm really considering a career, as a professional pilot. Hopefully in the military as well. But yeah, so I really have a passion for it. I'm currently working on my instrument rating, so I'm done with my private. I'm on to the next kind of leg of it all. But yeah, definitely the new guy. So.
Pretty cool. So you can see everyone comes from a lot of different backgrounds. Some people went the military route, others a different route. And I'm sure you guys are feeling like super overwhelmed. How do I get started? What does this look like? So I'm gonna ask Lou and Julie a question. What is the flight training process look like?
So here we would be a Part 61 school. So flight training based on the FAA regulations. We follow the FAA regulations. For a private pilot, just for an example, you need 40 hours minimum, the FAA says. I got my private license in like 77 hours, I don't know.
I think I was like low 80s.
Yeah,
maybe.
so that's kind of the average.
Yeah.
So, so you'll have to get a lot of, there's written exams to be done, and then there's certain requirements for the FAA that need to be done. You have to get a medical, a bunch of stuff that we can get into as we get more serious with the training, but that's kind of where to start.
What's the process? Everything we just said, but also I would say, it's a building block approach. So the process is you start out learning, block one, how to pre-flight, how to taxi an aircraft. That's a little different than a car. Takeoff and so on. And each of those blocks have sub-elements in them. And the whole idea is to repeat until you master those elements within that block. And then you go on to the next block, so to speak. So at first it's kind of, I would say, for most people, a little overwhelming. There's a lot to learn. You're in an airplane with a lot of noise that you're not used to. You're trying to hear the instructor. There's headsets and such, but still, I always tell students you're probably going to get about 25% of what I'm saying when you're in flight, just because of the environment and you're not used to it. And as time goes on, you'll get more than 25, you'll get 50, and hopefully by the end of the process, you're getting 100% and you're practicing and, and you're accomplishing the sub-elements. There's procedures to memorize. I would be lying if I said it's an easy process. It's really not. It's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of memory. There's a lot of, stick-to-itness, if you will, to do it and do it well, and then ultimately get your license. Jim?
No, I don't think that says it all.
That's the beginning of it. That's
Yeah, I think it's very overwhelming at first when you first start out because there's so much information and it's hard to know, like your brain's going everywhere. What do I focus on? But you just got to take it one step at a time and just kind of build from there. All right, so another question that I think is important to ask is, are there different types of licenses? What are the different types of licenses?
Check right.
So if you just want to fly for fun, you can get your private pilot license. And then, so he was just saying he got his private pilot license. That's where everybody would start, with your private pilot license. That's where you start with the building blocks and everything. And then the next license you would work for is your instrument rating. So you would add on to your private pilot license with an instrument rating. And an instrument rating just means that you're able to fly through the clouds. If it's a cloudy, rainy day outside, you won't have visibility looking outside. So it's just adding on to your private pilot license. Now I can fly using just instruments. So that's why it's called the instrument rating. And then if you're serious about becoming a commercial pilot, if you want to get paid to fly, it's going to be called your commercial rating. So it gets a little confusing with if you're just starting out with this, because when you hear private pilot, you think, oh, someone that flies private jets. Or commercial pilot, oh, someone that flies commercial planes. But a private pilot license is like someone that could fly like the 172 out there, a private pilot. And then a commercial pilot just means you can get paid to fly. So I'm a commercial pilot, but I can't fly a 747, but I can get paid to fly. So I hope that kind of clears it up.
Yeah, I think a lot of people do get a little confused on that.
Yeah, you know, and as if you choose flying for a career, not just to have fun or to, you know, go around and train others as a CFI or whatever, but you want to go choose it as a career, then, and there are many, many different careers, I guess we'll go into that here at some point, but in aviation, many different career paths. But if you choose that, then besides the commercial license, then, you know, you have to, for example, we mentioned jets. Well, when you fly in a jet, there's a requirement to have what's called the type rating, which isn't another license, but you have to be specifically trained in that jet. You can imagine going from a Learjet to a 747, there's a vast difference. And Jim could tell you, right? I mean, you know, or a helicopter to a fixed wing. So that's another whole avenue. I mean, it's a very broad kind of a career process if you're going to become a, you know, a career aviation-oriented person.
That's good.
And I heard you guys talking, I think, a little bit earlier about a medical, right? So what is that? Can you give me some insight on what a medical is?
Instead of a medical.
Yeah, what's a medical?
I mean,
Quiz.
so your medical is there's different classes of it. I feel like I'm really getting quizzed right now. But so there's different classes of it. There's a first class medical, a second class medical, and a third class medical. So like first class is like the airlines. If you can't meet those standards, then you won't be able to fly for the airlines as a pilot, essentially. Second class is just like all the commercial operations. You know, if you're going to fly Part 135, like NetJets or FlexJet out of here, that would fall under that category. And then third class medical, which is just less and less stringent as you go down, is like, you know, you're flying on your own time or you're a CFI kind of deal. And then basic med is, I don't know if you want to elaborate on the specifics of it, but
Yeah.
as use your CFI knowledge.
Yeah, that was pretty good.
Yeah.
And a medical is required, you have to go to an aviation medical examiner. So you just have to Google where to find an aviation medical examiner near me, and then you go take a test there to make sure you don't have any pre-existing conditions or things that would make you not capable to fly. I wear contacts, so on my medical it says must wear corrective lenses, so things like that would be included in your medical. Make sure that you're fit to fly.
Yeah, I think that pretty much covers it. They mentioned basic med. That's pretty new to the FAA, allowing folks to drive with just a driver's, to fly with just a driver's license. So, and the requirement, which means you still are, you know, they believe that if you're driving a car and it's 3 or 4 or 5 feet from a car on a highway, that gives you some credibility in terms of your ability to see and hear and, you know, control a vehicle and such. So some years back, the FAA, and I was there when it happened, we decided that we would try that for a period of time to see, you know, whether the accident rate went up, stabilized, went down, whatever. And it turns out since the FAA did that, it's been stable, that it hasn't caused an increase. Now, you are restricted from some elements of flying when you have a basic med. Basic med just means you can go to your own doctor to get a medical certificate for 4 years instead of, as Julie said, some of them are only good for a year, some 2 or 3 years, different first class, second class, third class. The basic med is 4 years. You're restricted from some parts of flying, and it's actually getting looser, so to speak, where you're able to do more things. The one catch, I say a catch, you have had to have passed one of the FAA medicals since 2006. So if you have been a previous pilot before 2006, obviously you did. Now, if you were going to get basic med, you take at least that third class, and however long it lasted for you. If you're under 40, it would last 5 years, the third class. So you wouldn't have to have another medical or basic med or whatever. If you're like me, a little bit over 40, it's only good for 2 years. But then if I wanted to now, I can go and get a basic med, go to my own doctor. I would have to take a little course, a little training course online to show that I know enough about my own physiology that if I'm ill, I'm not going to go fly. And it's a free course to go through. And then your doctor fills out some paperwork and swears that you're, pretty sound. And when you go, and you just hold on to that paperwork, and that's basic med.
So when you get a pilot's license, your pilot's license is good forever. What's not good forever is your medical certificate. So if you're going to fly an airplane, you have to both have your pilot's license and your medical certificate with you if you get checked by an FAA examiner. So people say to me, when are you going to renew your pilot's license? Because I didn't fly for a little while. I'm back flying now. But I said, well, my license was always good. It's my medical certificate that expires. And so you have to have that medical certificate to fly.
Yeah, I remember when I first learned about the medical, I was super overwhelmed by all that information. Basically, you just have to get checked out by a special doctor, and every couple years you'll have to get rechecked out, and they'll say you're still good to fly. So, yeah. What would you guys say the requirements to be a pilot are? You need your medical. We just talked about that. Is there anything else?
Just see it behind. Oh, man. Some other.
Notes. You shoot from the air.
This is all the same question for you guys. So the requirements to become a pilot, obviously read, speak, understand English. You have to be, which we'll get into the age restrictions. There's some age restrictions for different licenses, certificates. You have to have a medical, and then just generally requirements to be a pilot, just someone that's safety focused, someone that's responsible, someone of good character. And dad.
All the ages.
The ages, you could get
I'd say,
ages.
if someone's starting out, you have to be 16 years old or older to solo an airplane. So even if you start at 14 or 13, you can't solo the aircraft until you're 16. And you can't get a private pilot's license until you're 17. And then there's some other, if you're flying for the airlines, I think it's 21 for an ATP and some other restrictions, but age-wise. But realistically, so the goal of many young folks when they want to start before they're 16, solo on their 16th birthday, and then when they're 17, take their private pilot check ride, pass it, and then they got a long career ahead of them. You don't have to do it that way, but some folks want to do it that way. And let me see if I have something else here. Current medical was discussed many times. The other thing, the requirements. You have to fly with an instructor, obviously. There is a minimum number of hours, like 40, but that's unrealistic anymore today. That was like the Wright brothers. And now there's so much more complexity in the system that most people are right in that range of 75 to 85 hours for private. And I have flown with folks who had 120 hours. You know, they just come out on weekends, they do a flight here, a flight there, takes a long time, and it takes longer if you don't have the continuity, I can assure you of that. But you do have to take the flight instruction, you have to pass a written test before you take your check ride for a private pilot. And of course, the medical is a part of it. And during the check ride for the private pilot, that's given by not your instructor, but by what's called a designated examiner, or an FAA inspector, but truthfully, the FAA doesn't do many private pilot check rides anymore. They're too busy doing other things, so they designate certain people to do that. And that check ride, part of it is an oral discussion, so you pass a written test, which is only 60 questions, but it's a broad written, things like weather, navigation, radio communication, all kinds of stuff like that. But there's only 60 questions. But when you take your actual check ride with this examiner, that person will ask you many, many, many questions before you get in the airplane and start to fly. So those are the basic requirements.
I would say, to add on to that you'd have to have a real desire to fly. I mean, you can't just come out here and say, well, I think I'd like to be an airline pilot, so maybe I should take some flight lessons. Becoming an airline pilot should be secondary to becoming a pilot. Pilot is what you really want to be. You have to have that desire, you have to know aerodynamics, you have to have a deep interest in knowing how the airplane operates, have a sense of airmanship. The best pilots don't so much as get into an airplane as they strap it on, and it's part of them. You put it on like a glove, and you feel a part of it as you're flying. So if you have that kind of a sense and a desire to fly, you'll succeed, I think. But if you just come out and say, well, it's not like, you can't do it casually like tennis or golf. You can't say, well, I'll fly today and maybe next week or next month I'll go out and fly again. It doesn't work that way. You've got to dedicate yourself to a program, you've got to sign up, you've got to be dedicated to discipline to come out every few days, or I don't know how often, maybe once a week.
Once a week?
Yeah, something like that. But you've got to be dedicated to it and really stick to it. That's the only way to be a successful, good pilot.
And on that note, I mean, there's a lot of self-study. When you come out once a week or 3 times a week, I mean, you're not going to, you're just not going to get everything you need for these various building blocks unless you go home, study. We'll recommend books and textbooks, etc., for you to read up on the next phase before you come in and spend whatever you're going to spend, money and time and effort. And if you're only getting 25% of it in the air and you didn't preload yourself with what you're going to be faced with in that ride, there's less likely chance that you're going to pick it up on that ride. So, yeah.
Awesome. So let's say tomorrow I want to go up with you and I'm starting with 0 hours. How long is it going to take me to get my private pilot's license?
Everybody's different.
That's a tough question.
You're talking about time, like calendar time. Is that what you mean?
Yes, I'm going to say calendar time. It's a hard question because everyone is different.
Yeah, it's a very tough question. It's like they were kind of getting into, it's not like riding a bike. When you fly, you've got to keep current. You've got to go home and close your eyes and chair fly, flaps 10, make sure full forward, fuel pump on, things like that to really be staying current. So it's really how much you put into it. So as I was saying before, to get your private pilot license, average 75 to 85 hours. So if you do the math, if you're flying once a week, 2 hours, or an hour and a half, that's about a year to get your private pilot license. If you're going to take it more seriously, like the schools that we go to are a little more rigorous. I was flying like 4 times a week, so some people can you can get your license faster. It's really all your pace, kind of. We're not going to send you out there and make you take a check ride in a certain amount of time. You'll have to be ready to move on to the next stages for things. So it's all the work that you put in. It's really an open-ended answer. Like, you can't come in saying, I need to get this done in 3 months, because how windy it was today, we're not flying today. It's gonna snow all next week, we're not gonna fly next week. But it's good to study for the ground stuff. It gives you a lot of time to study the ground stuff and days off like this. So it's a really like...
Hanger flying. You can do hanger flying.
Yeah, hanger flying, chair flying. Yeah. Anything to add?
You want to describe hanger flying?
Yeah.
I don't know hanger flying, I know chair flying.
I guess I've done that one before.
It's ready.
So hanger flying is when if you can have access to one of the airplanes here. It's in the hangar, it's snowing out, so you can't fly. So you sit in the cockpit and you think about all the instruments and what you'd be looking at what time. You'd be looking at an attitude indicator now, and then you'd be looking at a vertical velocity indicator, and then you'd be looking at an altimeter, and then cross-checking where is the fuel switch, where is the radio switch. You know, that's called hangar flying. And you just sit in the cockpit of an airplane and get familiar with it.
Yeah, and chair flying would be the same, only without the cockpits. It's a little more difficult, you know, but it's the same principle. And nowadays, you know, with they call them simulators, you know, you have a computer, you can have a joystick, you can have foot pedals, and that, to me, that's very, very helpful, because you reinforce, even though there's no motion, the noise and so on, you can pay a lot of attention to the quote-unquote procedures, because you're in a nice quiet room and you can learn the procedures a lot quicker, and it makes life a lot easier. But just doing stuff at home with a simulator, just chair flying or hangar flying, if you get into a hangar with an airplane, is very, very helpful.
For sure. So what would you guys say makes someone a good pilot? What are some qualities in a person?
You got a lot more hours on me.
I'll take it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, don't ask me.
Yeah. I'll learn from you.
I mean, it would be, like I said before, you have to be dedicated to it. Someone that really wants to learn everything about aviation, including weather, how to handle the radios, traffic flows, and just have a sense of airmanship and be a part of the airplane. That would be, you know, those are the best pilots.
Yeah, I would just add, you know, there are a lot of rules to flying. I mean, it's full of rules. So a good rule follower is important. You know, it's just the way it is. You know, if you're a renegade, you don't want to follow the rules, and not only will you get yourself in trouble, but, you know, others will come out and seek you out. Hand-eye coordination is absolute. You know, you don't have to be the best athlete, but it does help to have a decent hand-eye coordination. I don't think there's any superpowers needed. I truthfully believe I can teach anybody to fly. It might take them longer, or, you know, and they may not want to excel to be, you know, the Sky King or whatever. But I think almost anybody can learn how to fly. And
If they have the desire.
if they have the desire, absolutely. Yeah, you have to have the stick-to-itiveness to do the building block and come back over and over. You know, even when it's frustrating if you don't get it on that flight, and you say, I just spent so much money, and blah, blah, blah. But you have to want to come back and try it again, and you'll succeed.
Awesome. So do you guys have any advice for maybe someone who's thinking about a career in aviation?
I'm pretty new in my career. I'm a certified flight instructor, CFI right now. But we were just talking about this before the panel. We like how aviation, it's not linear. There's so many things you can do in aviation. You can stay being a CFI, you can go to the military, you can fly corporate, you can fly seaplanes, airplanes, helicopters. That's what I like about it, just all the opportunities that you have, all the different things that you can go into. You don't, unless you want to, you can go to the airlines and fly a 747 and retire with a nice pension at 65, or you can like kind of basically do whatever your heart desires, which is kind of what's appealing to me.
All right. So I'm going to call Craig out.
Go ahead.
Craig, I'm going to ask you, has working at an airport made you a better pilot?
Undoubtedly, yes. I mean, obviously, everybody sitting to the right of me has a lot more experience and a lot more stories to tell, a lot of advice to give me as a young pilot in aviation. I wouldn't be exposed to that if I was working somewhere else, just flying on my own time. Again, kind of to go along with the flight training, I think that the more you prioritize becoming a pilot, the better you'll be. And for me, and I really had a dream of learning to fly and getting into aviation. I think working here has given me, a lot of different alleyways and a lot of different perspective on the careers, but also the best way to do it. So yeah, 120% working here has helped me in my training and moved it along quicker and probably saved me a little bit of money too. So.
Sweet.
Or you still calling me out right now?
Maybe a little bit.
All right, keep going.
Well, both of you guys, Julie and Craig, what are some, well, actually everyone, what are some common challenges that some pilots, aspiring pilots might face during their flight training?
I would say kind of like what Jim talked about, you gotta be persistent. You're gonna have a bad flight. You might fail a check ride, you might not do well on a test, but a good pilot's a resilient pilot. And again, you have to have that love for it that you're gonna keep coming back time and time again. If you're just trying to get to the airlines and make a nice check, then it might not be the career for you. There's definitely been some bumps in the road for me already. So I would say you really got to be resilient. And if you really have a love for aviation, just a love for flying in general, I think that'll kind of smoothen everything out for you. But yeah, persistence for sure.
Sums it up.
Yeah, obviously, money comes into play. It's not an inexpensive career path to get trained up. That's why a lot of folks go into the military, is because it's not free, but it's free. It's certainly not free. I think everything that was said, plus there are other issues that hopefully doesn't come up. But some people get a little airsick at the beginning, and they have to overcome that, or not. That's just part of the game. So there are other, environmental challenges, vertigo. If somebody gets vertigo very easily, that could be a challenge for somebody. So there are various things, but that's why you take an orientation flight, first of all, to see if you even like it. And then, as you go along, you may decide that this is not for me. And the best thing to do is drop out at that point. I'm not suggesting anybody does that, but it's, it happens.
So I'm just going to ask one more question until I open it up to you guys to ask some questions. What is your favorite part of being a pilot?
I'll start. I don't know if there's any one thing. I mean, this is so exciting to be a pilot. It's just such a different way of life and a different. Once you leave the ground, it's you've heard this saying, "I'm free as a bird." Well, you feel free as a bird flying an airplane. It's that plus the opportunities, like Julie said. You get an opportunity if you continue with a career. You can fly the most amazing advanced airplanes in the world, corporate airplanes, Boeings, Airbuses. It's just a privilege to be able to do that.
I'm not a golfer. I played golf twice in my life, and I stopped the second time because I thought this is going to consume me. Hitting that little ball and trying to get it in the hole, maybe I'm just a little too anal, but for me, for flying, everything you're doing, or I try to do, you're trying to do it in a very exacting way. You want a flight plan, a perfect flight. You want to make a perfect takeoff. You want to, fly the instruments perfectly. And the best part is making a nice smooth landing at the end. So if you're goal-oriented and you don't want to wait 6 months to see the end of the goal, short flight is very satisfying, at least to me it is.
I guess on top of those two, another thing, going through flight training, I started flying when I was 28, so this was a career change for me. So this was like the hardest thing I've ever done by far. And after you get like your private pilot cert, they hand over your private pilot cert, you're just like, wow, I can't believe I just did that. So just the like satisfaction of all the hard work, all the like literally blood, sweat, and tears you put into this, it's so worth it at the end. And I'm just like always so proud to meet people that are in there, just starting their career, further into their career. I just love hearing from people who share the love for aviation. It's a really cool group of people. Like when you get your private pilot cert, you're part of that 1% of the population that knows how to fly a plane, which is a really cool thing.
So for me, so far, in my young career, if you will, it's just been how challenging it's been. I'm the kind of person that likes a challenge, and it was such a, it was like getting thrown into a pool. And just the sheer amount of information that aviation holds and all the different places that you can go with it. There's just always something to keep learning, and for me, it's just every day is a new challenge, and I love that. I finished school and I was kind of looking for the next thing, and I feel like this will keep me busy for the rest of my life. I want to learn how to work on airplanes. I want to learn how to fly all of them. It's just, it's really never going to end, and I want to keep learning and learning and learning. And I feel like aviation provides me a vehicle to do that. So I'm very grateful for it.
Awesome.
You reminded me of something. In the aviation career, we're all talking about flying, we love flying, we love airplanes, but there's another whole piece of the career called maintenance. And it also is very exacting and very challenging. And, but I certainly would feel like I wasn't doing justice if I didn't mention that end of it. Somebody has to maintain the airplanes, and they have to maintain them. I mean, all of us as pilots, we know that you don't want to sit in an airplane when you're not sure that it's ready to fly. And typically it's the mechanic to make sure that it's ready to fly. I mean, you do your due diligence as a pilot, pre-flight and so on, but someone took it all apart once a year or more often, put it all back together, and they did it in a very, very methodical, checklist kind of a way. So it's another career in aviation that is worth pursuing.
For sure. So now I want to open the panel up to you guys. Do you guys have any questions you want to ask this very experienced group? Yeah, what's up?
My name is Van. I go to the Eastern Suffolk Botz program near Brookhaven Airport. And I just wanted to ask, what's like one piece of advice that you would give to someone like in my shoes on what I should do going forward?
So one piece of advice for someone who's in the Botz program moving forward.
For piloting.
Mm-hmm.
One piece of advice.
Study.
Where to go next? What next steps?
Yeah.
Next step, so you're what, a senior or junior?
It's my first year.
First
So,
year.
yeah, I'm doing aviation.
And I'm not that familiar, I know what Botz is in general, but is it a mechanics kind of a course, or what are you into in terms of Botz?
Yeah, so they have a bunch of different courses, and they teach people like, it's like a trade school, so they give you the information you're gonna need to like advance in your career and like actually get that job.
By the end of the course, he'll have taken the FAA cert.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. The FAA written
Yeah.
Yes.
cert, okay, so it's kind of pointing you in that kind of direction. It is pointing you. All I can say is do well.
Don't get discouraged.
Don't get discouraged, do well, and that you'll have, mechanical ability, academics in that arena puts you well on your way.
So how old are you?
I'm 16.
You're 16.
Or
He
17.
just turned 17.
17.
That
17.
was going to be my question. I was
Yeah.
going to say you could start your flight training now. At ATP, I think we had. Is there another school? It's not called that. But there's another school that does something similar on Long Island.
I'm not sure.
I don't know.
Various flyers, maybe?
Something like that, where he came out and he was like a mechanic at the end, or he took the FAA test to be a mechanic.
There is a mechanic also.
Yeah, he did something like that. It sounds familiar. I don't know the exact name, but I would just say like absorb everything. Everything is going to be relevant. Everything that you learn there, you're going to need to know if you're going to go on to get your private pilot license, your commercial pilot certificate, whatever. So everything is going to be relevant. Just absorb it all as a sponge. And then since you're 16, you can start trying out different flight schools. You're at Brookhaven. I know you've got the Brookhaven Airport there. You can do a discovery flight there, discovery flight here. Just see what works for you, and just keep chugging along. It's great that you're so young to get started with it. So like, don't feel like you've got to rush through this and I got to get my private pilot cert by 17. Like, take your time, get it done. Everyone's on their own schedule.
Yeah, I would say enjoy the ride. I didn't start flying airplanes until I was 23 years old, so you're way ahead of us. But yeah, I would say as far as school in general, but the more you prioritize it, the better you'll do. You know, so the more time you spend studying, the more I guess hangouts with your friends you turn down to study, so to speak. You know, you're gonna have to make sacrifices. And the more that you do, the better that you'll excel in that program. I mean, that goes for anything, but aviation especially. There's a lot more than just like getting in the airplane and going and flying. So, and I guess I learned that the hard way. But yeah, so the more you prioritize it, the better. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I think those are great responses. I would definitely look into getting your instruments next. I know within the next month or so, we'll be having discovery flights available, and Lou is a instructor that's certified to instruct instrument rating. So I would definitely have a conversation with him, and maybe even look into colleges that offer aviation programs. Does anyone else have any questions? Yeah.
So, to build on to his, because my son's thinking about taking this BOCES class.
Yeah.
Like any credits that they might earn in that class, if they're FAA crew, will transfer over to you guys if they decide, that they want to pursue this and take actual flights.
So you're asking, he has some hours already at BOCES?
He's pretty young yet, he's only 14.
Oh, okay.
But like if he does.
If he starts at BOCES,
Yeah.
will those hours count towards his next
The written test, any credits that they
any
might
training?
get.
Yeah. One of you guys want to answer that?
Yeah, first of all, flight hours, if that's where it goes, where you have an opportunity to take a lesson from an instructor and they are willing to put it in a logbook and sign it, then it's forever.
I'm not sure they do actual flying.
Flying.
You might know better because he said they do.
They
But
do
any
fly.
paper tests, any credits that they might get?
Well, what would count is if, as this young man said, if it leads to the written test, let's say a private pilot written test, that test it would count, but it's only good for 2 years. So when you take it, you'd be up on many things that others would not have, but if it expires after 2 years, you'd have to take it again prior to getting your license. Flight hours, on the other hand, logged flight hours count forever. So to fill various federal air regulation requirements, X number of hours in this, cross-country, instrument, etc., make sure you get it in a logbook, and then it's good forever.
So it's a sign minus one.
Yep.
At what age would you start? Like, is there a minimum age that they can start taking tests and training?
Training, you can start training pretty much when you reach the pedals, so to speak. Now you can't get a student pilot certificate, a student pilot's license until you're almost 16. They allow you to take it before you're 16. So you can't solo till you're 16. You get a medical anytime, but there's a life, there's a shelf life on a medical. A student pilot, they want you not to get that until you're just before you're 16. And then you can solo after you have it. So most people, they might start at 14 or 15, build the hours to get ready to solo, not only the hours, but the experience and the know-how. And then on their 16th birthday, like I said earlier, or later, it doesn't matter. And you don't need a written test or anything. You do have to be quizzed by your instructor to make sure you're ready to get in the airplane by yourself. You just go around the pattern about 3 times. That's a first solo. But you have to be 16 to do that.
Hey,
How much does a private pilot license cost?
how much does a private pilot license cost? That is also a great question. It's very similar to how long does it take to get it? As in, maybe one of you guys want to answer that?
Yeah, and it is very much connected to how many hours it takes you to get it, obviously. But if you figure that a flight with an instructor might cost $250 to $300 an hour. It just depends on the airplane you're in and how much fuel goes up and down, et cetera, et cetera. And then you multiply it by 75, 80 hours. And then you have to add some other stuff, like you'll need to buy a headset, other ancillary kinds of things that you'll need to become a pilot. So you can do the math, but it's not an inexpensive process. But again, it can be stretched out. It's going to cost you a little more money by stretching it out. You can live in a perfect weather place, which would make it easier and more conducive to flying 2 or 3 times a week, maybe. So it really there's a lot of dependence. But if you just said $280 an hour and you multiply that by 75 hours, you're going to have a ballpark. That's fine. In this type of airplane. If you want to go up in a jet, it's going to be a little more.
Anyone else have questions? What's up?
Hey, I'm Connor Brady. I'm a pilot from Montauk. I'm a BOCES graduate, actually, as well. And I just received my commercial, and I'm looking to pursue my CFI. Is that going to be a course you guys are going to offer?
Connor, for you, almost anything. I can't say at this time. It's up to the management. But
Do you guys have any 2-year CFIs that are up to date and current with it in the instruction portion?
I'm not a 2-year.
eligible to teach CFI?
Yeah. Yeah, okay.
CFI for everybody means Certified Flight Instructor.
Can I take any more questions? Anyone else? Yep.
Hi, good evening. My name is Luis. Thank you for all the explanation, the insight. I have a question regarding, I will imagine that there is a curriculum, if someone decides to become, a private pilot student. And is that curriculum, just wondering, I don't know whether that's set by the FAA or somewhere else, or how does it work in terms of how, if you decide I want to go to this flight school, how that works? Is like each flight school has their own approach to how they implement the curriculum, how they teach it, or is there like I can look and say, okay, this is everything that's got to be learned, and you just kind of like trying to, I'm wondering about that.
Yeah, take a look.
Okay, so it starts with the federal air regulations. So the FAA has set out many years ago the requirements to become a pilot. And of course, it's all written in legalese and it's hard to understand. So many organizations, a number of them, this is Jeppesen, for example. This is a syllabus that a company named Jeppesen, owned by Boeing now, builds for a private pilot. And they'll have one for a commercial pilot. And it breaks it down into those building blocks that I was talking about earlier. So you'll have a chapter, and it'll go along with a booklet of some kind of textbook, a chapter on taking off or landing or flying the local pattern And the syllabus will go step by step. Now you said how many are there? There are a number of them, and the truth is, Julie mentioned we will be in a federal air regulation FAR Part 61 school. There are another type of flight training school called an FAR Part 141 school. The 141 school is more stringent. It will dictate how often, not how often, but what step to take every time you come out. A more severe, significant, whatever you want to call it, grading process and so on, than Part 61. Part 61 is more, you don't have the time to come out 3 times a week, or you don't have the money to come out 3 times a week, or whatever it is, it's more flexible. At the end of the game, so to speak, both of them, you wind up with a private pilot license, and the truth is, when you look at all the stats, the graduates of one versus the other is about the same number of hours. 141 probably a little less, but then again, because you're flying more, frequently and so on. So, but the syllabus, you can do it with a Jepson syllabus, you can do it with a King syllabus, you can do it with a Climb syllabus.
Get online, right?
Yeah, you can do it right online. You can
Get
do it
online.
Okay, great.
See which one. I think we're sort of talking about using the Jefferson.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah. There is also what's called ground school, which is the textbook part of training, and then your actual flight hours, which is where you are in the airplane flying around. So you're doing kind of the brain power and then the physical, actual maneuvers. Does anyone else have any questions? What's up?
I've got 2.
Yeah.
If somebody could elaborate on the Air Force route to becoming a pilot, like what the commitment is, and secondly, what are the prospects for young folks like the 4 of you to make a living out here in La La Land as aviation? You don't know how hard it is, right?
Yeah. So the question about the Air Force is perfect for you, Jim.
Yeah, so. It was many years ago that I went through this, but I don't think it's changed much. To become an Air Force pilot, you first have to have a bachelor's degree, a minimum. You have to graduate from a 4-year college with a bachelor's degree, and you have to become an officer. So the Air Force has their own college called Air Force Academy, and those graduates come out with a bachelor's degree, and they're also commissioned officers when they come out. If you graduate from a private college with a 4-year degree, you have to go to officer school that the Air Force provides down in San Antonio, Texas, and that's about a 6-month operation. And then when you come out of that, you're an officer, and they assign you to a flight school. There's about, I guess there's maybe 6 or so around the country now, 5 or 6. There's not as many as there was years ago. But, I went to one in, Mike is working. The one I went to was in Laredo, Texas, and it was a just over a year long. And first segment was learning how to fly a Cessna 172, like this one right out here. And if you could pass that and get you solo in that and get enough hours, then they move you to primary jet training, and that's about a 7-month course where you're really put through the. They just wring you out. I mean, it's that whole year was. Every day was you get up at 5 in the morning, you have class for a few hours, and then you go fly for a few hours, and then you study for a few hours. You go to bed at 10 o'clock at night. You get up at 5 o'clock the next morning, and you do it all over again. And one week you're flying in the morning and class in the afternoon, and the next week it flips. And it was the most intense training I've ever had in my life. But it was, I mean, it's just when you come out the other end, you're really, really a good pilot. So after the basic training, basic jet training, then you go to advanced jet training, That's another 6 months, so that's why it's a little bit more than a year. And then they send you to combat crew training or whatever mission you're going to fly. If you're going to be a cargo pilot, they'll send you to a school where you learn how to fly cargo airplanes, and that's your mission for the next several years. The commitment, when I was in, the commitment was 6 years. I think it's up to 12 now. If you want to become an Air Force pilot, I think you have to sign up for 12 years. But I have to tell you, I stayed in 12 years anyway, even though it was a 6-year commitment, and it goes by so fast. It was one of the most exciting, exhilarating things I've ever done in my life. So that's Air Force. I don't know.
Test.
I guess we'll shoot it.
So they're very selective on who they choose, and more times than not, they're going to choose somebody who already has a civilian pilot's license. And when you come back from pilot training in that program, after officers training, pilot training, you fly whatever airplane they have there. So like Brzezinski would be the C-130 with the helicopters. Go to another unit at Andrews, for example, they have tankers and so on. And you wind up having 2 careers, which is pretty much half of my career in the Air Force was 2 careers. I had the FAA career. You have to have a civilian job. You don't have to have a civilian job. You're not going to make enough money as a reservist or a guardsman to support a family and such. So you really have, a lot of things going, very, very rewarding. And you're there for a purpose. You're there to be called up in case there's some kind of war or whatever it is. And I went through a couple of those, and you can't say at some point that, hey, I don't want to do that. You sign up to do that, and you train to do it. So there are a lot of different ways to get a military career going, and I wouldn't, for a minute, I feel like a recruiter, but I would look at, if I were going to go the military route, I would look at all 3, Guard, Reserve, and Active Duty.
Awesome. I think we have time for 1 or 2 more questions, if anyone else has any.
Then the second part of your question, how hard is it to get a job out here? So I was just kind of going through it. I live in Sag Harbor, I was applying to jobs. There's a few corporate jobs available on Long Island, West Hampton Airport, Islip. Farmingdale's really big for corporate jets. And then if you want to go commercial airlines, Delta, United, American, things like that. It's definitely possible to commute from here. They like you to live within 2 hours of your base, and you can be based out of New York. A lot of the airlines have a base in New York, LaGuardia or JFK. So it's definitely possible. It's kind of tough now. They say airline hiring is very cyclical, so you have to be flexible. So if I wasn't able to get a job in the next couple months, it's like, okay, I may have to be open to moving somewhere, moving to Florida or something like that. So it kind of depends on your goals. But it's not impossible. There's plenty of airline captains out here. You start meeting them because they'll love to tell you.
So to touch on that, like there's companies that, like Blade, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm sure they have the high pilots. Would that be what you could incorporate?
Yeah, Blade, I don't know a ton about Blade. I can tell you.
So Blade isn't they don't own any airplanes. They are a booking company. They book seats in airplanes. So what they do is they have agreements with companies that own helicopters and seaplanes. And those are the companies that would be hiring the pilots.
Kind of like Uber. Uber doesn't own the car.
Gotcha.
All right, any more questions? Anyone? All right, well, thank you guys so much for coming out tonight. We have some coffee over there, some snacks. Feel free to take a sweatshirt or a shirt. We just ask that you tell us what you take so we don't lose count of what we have. And if anyone has any questions they want to ask, we'll hang out for a little bit and feel free. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.